While the Bay Area has its share of legends, none are quite as bizarre as that of Sarah Winchester in the Winchester Mystery House. Who was Sarah Winchester? Was she just an eccentric widow with too much time and money on her hands? Was she running from the spirits of lost souls that perished as a victim of the firearm company that she has now inherited? Or are the legends wrong, and Sarah was just a subdued, family-oriented, albeit wealthy woman that few understood? If you are local to San Jose, you can likely recite the story without much thought. An eccentric widow, heir to the Winchester Repeating Arms Company, is tormented by the spirits who suffered death caused by the weapon. She becomes convinced by a medium that the only thing that will keep her safe is moving west and beginning a never-ending construction, and, if construction stops, the spirits will find her and kill her. The result of her delusion is the Winchester Mystery House, a testament to her insanity. Indeed, it's a fascinating tale, but as far as historical record goes, there's little proof to support this. The lore that followed Sarah Winchester begins in 1895, over a decade after Sarah bought a modest 8-room farmhouse in San Jose, California. According to the legend, Sarah was on the run from a band of ghosts that were the victims of the Winchester firearm, but that was not the case. Family was the reason for Sarah's move, not ghosts or the supernatural. After her husband, William Wirt Winchester, died of tuberculosis in 1881, Sarah decided to leave the East Coast to be with family. Her brother-in-law, Homer Sprague, was the president of Mills College, and 2 of her sisters already lived in the Bay Area. After tragedy befell Sarah once again, after losing her daughter Annie, who died in 1866 of marasmus, and now her husband William from tuberculosis, Sarah instantly became one of the wealthiest women in the world. Her share of the Winchester Repeating Arms Company amounted to a $20 million inheritance, equivalent to $600 million in today's money, 50% ownership in the company, and an income of $1,000 per day, equivalent to $32,000 per day in today's money. Now, with plenty of money and many ideas, Sarah began the process of renovating her new property. Sarah was unsure of her vision for her new property. She hired and dismissed many architects, and though Sarah had no formal training in architectural design, Sarah set out to design the plans herself. Sarah soon realized things would be much more difficult than she had anticipated. "I am constantly having to make an upheaval for some reason," Winchester wrote to her sister-in-law in 1898. "For instance, my upper hall, which leads to the sleeping apartment, was rendered so unexpectedly dark by a little addition that after a number of people had missed their footing on the stairs, I decided that safety demanded something to be done." Many believe this nonsensical mansion arose as a product of Sarah's dedicated spiritualism, but the truth is that this design is, quite simply, the result of mistakes. Many, many mistakes. With a seemingly endless income, Sarah could afford to make these mistakes, so she did, and her build continued. Sarah was an introvert. She preferred the quiet life with close family. She was the opposite of most millionaires in the area who were out socializing and thunderously donating to charities. Because of this, the locals began to gossip. It didn't help when the February 24, 1895 issue of the San Francisco Chronicle ran an article that would almost certainly lay foundation for the Winchester Mystery House legend. "The sound of the hammer is never hushed," the article stated. "The reason for it is Miss Winchester's belief that when the house is entirely finished she will die. Whether she had discovered the secret of eternal youth and will live as long as the building materials, saws, and hammers last, or is doomed to disappointment as a great Ponce de Leon in his search for the fountain of life, is question for time to solve," the writing concludes. The story quickly gained footing, and articles began to appear all over the state. But the narratives spun by such articles were unreliable. As it turns out, construction on this elaborate yet baffling home did stop, and on more than one occasion. In one letter to family, Sarah wrote that she'd halted construction for the summer as it was too hot to work. "I became rather worn and tired out and dismissed all the workmen to take such rest as I might through the winter," she wrote. Many articles began to circulate, speaking not of the legend we hear today, spirituality, ghosts, immortality, but of Sarah's wastefulness. A 1909 article in the Chronicle about Sarah reads, The lonely heiress to millions has found her sole pleasure during the last 7 years in directing the efforts of workmen who are called upon to construct one month what they destroyed the next. Historians have speculated one of the reasons Sarah kept building was because of the economic climate. By continuing construction, she was able to keep locals employed. In her own peculiar way, it was an act of goodwill. In 2018, historian Janann Boma tells the Los Angeles Times, Sarah was just an ardent, albeit eccentric, philanthropist who used her family fortune to purposefully employ the San Jose community. She had a social conscience, and she did try to give back, noting that the hospital Sarah built in her husband's name. This house in itself was her biggest social work of all, says Boma. If you search articles about the heiress in California newspaper archives, none written during her lifetime mention her hiding from ghosts, an obsession with the number 13, or hosting seances. Often she's described as a wealthy, eccentric introvert. When Sarah Winchester died in 1922, the news in San Jose hardly noticed. Back in New Haven, her hometown newspaper wrote keenly of the over $1 million gift she'd bequeathed to a local hospital. Few in the Bay Area mourned her, only her very small circle. A few days ago, a quiet woman went quietly out of life, leaving a fortune of some millions, all of it for philanthropy, an unsigned editorial in the Mill Valley Record wrote. She had no children, so she gave her stocks and bonds, her wealth of whatever form, to the public in the most advantageous manner possible. This woman was Miss Winchester. How many thousands of lives will be blessed by Miss Winchester's bequest, yet the newspaper accounts of her going and its attendant circumstances were brief and unadorned. In her will, Sarah left most of her wealth to charity, and all that remained went to her niece, Marion Marriott. Her many real estate holdings were auctioned off, leaving no paper trail to any of the original Winchester furnishings. The Winchester house was sold at auction to a local investor for over $135,000 and subsequently leased for 10 years to John and Mamie Brown, who eventually purchased the house. John H. Brown was a theme park worker who designed roller coasters. In February 1923, 5 months after Sarah's death, the house was opened to the public, with Mamie Brown serving as the first tour guide. Less than 2 years after Sarah Winchester's death, newspapers suddenly began writing about the mansion's mysteriousness. In 1924, the Healdsburg Tribune wrote, "The seance room, dedicated to the spirit world in which Miss Winchester had such faith, is magnificently done in heavy velvet of many colors. Here are hundreds of clothes hooks upon which hang many costumes. Miss Winchester, it is said, believed that she could don any of these costumes and speak to the spirits of the characters of the area represented by the clothing," the article continued. It should be noted that there are no modern-day accounts of Sarah holding seances, and it has been said that the seance room was actually a gardener's private quarters. However, the myth took hold, and the home, with its doors to nowhere, tight turns, and 40 staircases, is easy to imagine as haunted. Although the stories of ghosts and spirits are fun, the ghosts shroud the real life of a fascinating and innovative woman. Miss Winchester was as sane and clear-headed a woman as I have ever known, her lawyer Samuel Leaves said after her death. She had a better grasp of business and financial affairs than most men. We may never know the real reason that Sarah Winchester built her unconventional masterpiece, but you can visit for yourself and draw your own conclusions.